In this video, we're going to talk about another 2015 World's Power Pick, and this time it's going to be Vayne in the AD carry position. As we all know, the tournament is stacked with a lot of AD carry talent, and Vayne happens to be one of those few champions that allows an AD carry to truly outclass the competition and really carry hard through sheer mechanical skill. Don't be fooled though, she's a champion that requires a lot of planning in terms of making sure that she gets past the early laning, as well as she has a good team composition to make her work. Now let's get straight into the strengths of the champion. She's one of the best snowballing AD carries alongside Kalista and Draven, who can really take over a game very quickly with a strong lead. And she also happens to be one of the best 1v1 champions in the game with her stealth, mobility, as well as silver bolts, allowing her to kill anybody very quickly. She's also a fantastic split pusher, which is an aspect that's often overlooked in the AD carry position. Another aspect that I truly enjoy about this champion is that unlike other AD carries who truly rely on the Infinity Edge as a first item, being from a BF sword first purchase, which costs 1550 gold, or a pickaxe, which is 875, her itemization of Blade of the Ruined King early allows for good sustain during the laning phase, which makes her laning phase a lot better than most champions due to the ability to take a lot of harass and just lifesteal back up once the wave gets pushed into the tower. Now, that same itemization often builds into the Cutlass and the Blade of the Ruined King. Sometimes we see Bloodthirster's Vayne, but it's really not the best item to have early. Now, the Cutlass and the Blade of the Ruined King, comboed with her ability to chase down people very quickly, as well as condemn, make her a fantastic AD carry to set up a gank, similar to Kalista and Ashe, who can really snowball somebody and catch them out of position with actual CC. So she's really good at setting that up and creating opportunities for their team, so she's a good lane to gank for, unlike other snowballing champions who have a much harder time setting things up themselves. A good aspect about Vayne is that in a team fight, she punishes anybody that's out of position. So a very common technique that tanks like to use when they play a team fight is isolating themselves as well as taking out an AD carry out of the position. So if I'm a Maokai, I'd probably go in front of the Vayne and just CC her for a little while so that she can't hit the rest of my team. Now if it's any other AD carry, that's a likely strategy to succeed. But the fact that Vayne has silver bolts and deals percentage true damage of maximum hit points really allows her to shred through tanks better than any other champion in the game. So she's really useful at that and really punishes a tank or anybody that tries to get out of position and tries to run down Vayne by herself. So she requires a lot of coordination to take down in a team. She has a fantastic late game due to her steroids of both her tumble and her ultimate. Combo that with a crit build, which includes either a Static Shiv, a Youmuu's Ghostblade, Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, and you're hitting crits harder than anybody else at pretty crazy speeds, especially considering the fact that you more often than not will get the first hit due to the stealth and mobility from your ultimate. And an overlooked aspect of the champion is that if she falls behind, which often happens a lot in Vayne games, she has the ability to really catch up quickly, and again, through the mistakes of an opponent, she can carry team fights regardless of her position in accordance to the other AD carry, simply due to the silver bolts being able to deal that much consistent damage. It's an ability that doesn't have any scaling, it's simply just a flat out amount of damage, and it can be useful in any situation. Now, let's go straight into the weaknesses of the champion, and there's quite a few, but luckily her kit and the team comps that you build around her make her overlook that. And the first one is that she has very short range. Now, unlike other AD carries, her range really doesn't let her push towers well. So she's really weak at that and can often be hit by a lot of spells. So that's why the Vaynes have to be mechanically proficient in order to not get hit by certain long range mages such as a Nazir, a Victor, and Orianna that can really get the first jump on her and immediately take her out of the fight if she's unable to dodge these kinds of abilities. This means that the teams also need to focus a lot around skirmishes and objectives due to the fact that sieging is simply out of the question unless they go with a champion that can actually siege from the mid lane, such as a Azir or maybe a Xerath kind of champion that can really let Vayne get into position to actually hit the tower due to this harass from the soldiers, or can just take down the tower by themselves, again with the soldiers. She can also be abused in lane. So an example would be the Gauntlet tournament in which Cloud9 faced a Vayne from TIP, and they ran a Draven against her. Now I believe the Vayne actually came out against Team Liquid as well. I'm not entirely sure about that, but Draven is a champion that can snowball super hard in the laning phase, which is Vayne's main weakness, is due to the fact that she has not purchased Sustain yet through the Vamp Scepter, or she doesn't have the scaling with her ultimate or the tumble that is very leveled, because usually Vayne's will max the silver bolts first. So she struggles in the laning phase, especially against champions that can just do very quick bursts of harass, such as Draven, and can snowball super hard off her. So that champion, as well as other picks such as Kalista. Now Kalista necessarily isn't very good against Vayne. The problem with Kalista is that a lot of the team compositions around her have such hard CC and engage that make it very difficult for Vayne to actually succeed outside of the laning phase. So Kalista can have an easy time harassing if she has a good matchup, as well as once team fights start rolling around, Vayne will have a difficult time dealing with such a swarm of champions just trying to crowd control her. And lastly, the thing that we mentioned to be the strength of the champion is that since she's so skill reliant, she depends a lot on having a good matchup with the support. So picking for the Vayne lane is very important. Otherwise, you're really going to have to resort to a lane swap. And some teams are significantly better than others in that. So it's hard for a team to, for instance, have a fantastic AD carry. They're like, our AD carries are god, but our macro play is not as strong as perhaps one of the Asian teams. Are we really going to risk picking the Vayne and knowing that our Vayne can actually play the game very well, but if we get called in the lane swap, or if we fail to do a 1v2 properly, we're going to lose the game right from the get-go. So it's kind of a risky pick in that sense, because she relies so much on the macro strategy to actually get her past the early stages of the game. And because once you rely on the macro strategy to get her out of that phase, you end up relying on her to be mechanically proficient. She's very susceptible to a lot of Vayne spotting. So AD carries have to be in the zone to really play Vayne well, and if you get in the zone, maybe you're a little bit too in there, start doing some Vayne spotting here and there, it can be a pretty drastic change for your team if they start seeing you play like that and really throw the game for your team. Now, a lot of the compositions that rely on Vayne have one similar trend, and that is that she's not the main focus. So multi-threat compositions are the best that work for Vayne. She's a champion that can either chase down very well or retreat very well. Preferably whichever one the comp does the most, but more importantly is that multiple threats have to be in place for Vayne to work. Now, full dive compositions are fantastic with her. An example would be LGD recently ran a composition that has Lulu top, Rek'Sai in the jungle, Diana mid lane, and Alistar Vayne. So Alistar is a good champion for Vayne in the laning phase because he has a fantastic setup. Headbutt, pulverize, condemn to a wall. Very simple setup to get any kills. Defend yourself against any ganks, as well as the ability to just max out that heal, allowing Vayne to lane a little bit better because you really don't need that much more damage since Vayne provides just so much. And because Diana dives in so heavily, she's not a champion that ever peels back. She has the Diana to go in by herself and then gets ultied by Lulu, making her an even bigger target and a bigger distraction. It really lets Vayne get into the fight from the outskirts and really dish out as much damage as possible. Because she can kill tanks so quickly, you really don't care who she's hitting the majority of the time, because no matter what is going to be effective damage and she is going to be able to take somebody down. And the thing about the champion that you want to have multiple threats is one of the weaknesses that we spoke about, which was the fact that she has very short range and isn't good at sieging composition, at sieging. So this is because when you have short range, it takes a lot longer for you to get into the fight, and you have a much smaller window of places where you can be and effectively team fight. So for example, if you're a Tristana, you can really be on the outside of a fight and jump in. You have tools. You have tools to disengage if somebody hits you. You have the Buster shot to get him out of there, and you have just a much wider circle to actually fight in safely and dish out as much damage as you need to. Similar to a Kog'Maw composition with a range of, I believe, 925 with the W up, he really doesn't need to care that much about his positioning and have it be perfect. So having two threats on the Kog'Maw composition, or compositions that are protect the Cog or protect the Triss or protect the Jinx, are really effective because of the range. Now for a Vayne, that's just not the case, because the short range of her really doesn't let her do enough damage to justify the composition around her. So that's why you want multiple threats. Another example of another composition that, again, has multiple threats, but a less engaged style and more kiting, is one that was ran by KT Roasters, which had Riven top, Gragas in the jungle, Azir in the mid lane, and then Vayne Janna bot lane. So Vayne Janna, really strong lane. Vayne really shines with Janna's mobility and ability to disengage anybody trying to dive her. Similarly with Azir and Janna, these two really can siege well because of the ability to just shield one and then just constantly hammer on the turret, even if there isn't a creep wave, especially with a tanky champion like a Gragas, can really move into the front line, deal enough damage. There's good tools of engage there, not nearly as hard as LGDs, but Gragas, Riven, and Azir can really offer some good engage if the opportunity arises. And this is a really nice comp for Vayne, and this is the kind of thing we want to see from the upcoming tournament. Compositions that just have multiple threats, and more importantly, threats in the top lane. With the trend of juggernauts and Vayne being able to deal so well with and against them, these champions will really shine with these compositions because of the distraction that they can provide. And similarly against, Vayne can really take down champions that can not reach the backline very well. So for instance, like an Olaf, a Fiora, doesn't have enough CC on their own to really take down the Vayne if she's in a good position. So these are the champions that Vayne really strives with and against, and will really make or break these compositions. I think that we can probably expect every team in the tournament to try to play Vayne to a certain extent, to be honest, just because of how powerful she is in the current meta in dealing with the tanks, the split pushing ability, and how good the AD carries in this tournament are. I think it can really showcase some fantastic plays from the champion. And because there's so much synergy between the Vayne and the support, there's a lot of really good supports in the tournament as well. That just makes the champion that much more of a desired pick. Now, there'll probably be quite a few bans of the champion, especially for teams that will be facing somebody that they just saw do really well with Vayne. You're thinking, I don't really feel like dealing with this champion. That guy looked like he really knew what he was doing on that pick. He never fell behind in CS. His split pushing was excellent. His team fighting was bar none. And those are the kind of games that really make people want to ban the champion, but nothing to really permanently ban. Even if it got to a best of 5 or a best of 3 time at the world bracket stage, I don't think this is a champion that really warrants that many bans, just because of how fragile she is to actually run successfully. Only the fantastic teams will actually be able to do so, and more than likely the teams that will win the actual tournament will be the ones that would really focus on this pick. I hope that this video was informative about how to play with Vayne and against her, although actually I forgot a tiny little bit about it, that to deal with Vayne, you need to have a really good understanding as to when to pressure her in the laning phase. So laning is her weakness, as we mentioned, because she lacks items, and that time is the time to strike, because she has a lot of good power spikes between levels 2 and 3, where 2, 3, 5, like she has a lot of times where she can be really aggressive depending on her support. So those are times that a jungler would really want to be in that lane and really punish her, because if she starts falling behind, she's going to be stuck at tower for the large majority of the game, trying to catch back up and find any 1v1 situation. Because she lacks wave clear, she's more likely than not to be stuck on their tower for a large part of the game, and that's a position that if you're against Vayne, you really want to be in. If you have a champion like a Tristana or a Corki or a Jinx even that can really siege down towers quickly, you keep Vayne stuck in one lane farming, and then you start rotating around the map and taking a lot of objectives. So teams that play against her will really want to punish her, because she creates a lot of opportunities for winning if you're against her and she's behind. But if you're ahead, you're the guy that wants to protect Vayne as much as possible and have her play as passive as possible with really perfectly timed aggression, because if you can actually snowball on her, she can just take over a game completely. So let me rephrase again to what I was saying earlier. I hope this video was enjoyable and you're able to actually retain some information as to how the champion works and how you can expect her to be played at the upcoming 2015 World Championship. If you have any suggestions for any future champions that you think are actually going to be very contested at the tournament, feel free to let me know, and we might just have a video about them.